Good evening, Mr. Oppal. How are you?
I'm fine, Yasmin. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Not at all.
I want to speak to you. After George Floyd's death, the officer responsible was initially charged with third-degree murder, but is now being charged with second-degree. What are your thoughts on this? Why not a first-degree murder charge?
Well, first-degree murder means that it has to be premeditated. In Canada, first-degree murder means that it has to be planned and deliberate. So you have to plan the murder ahead of time and then commit the murder. In the United States, their law is you have to premeditate. The same thing, you have to plan it. It doesn't look like this murder was planned.
Right.
There was intent to kill because he had his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. But it doesn't seem like there was a plan ahead of time to kill Mr. Floyd. Rather, they were trying to arrest him on a forgery charge, and based on that, they committed the murder. So that's really where it was. And so I can understand why it would not be a first degree.
Right. And this is not an isolated incident. There has been many cases of police brutality in the United States where no charges have been made. So how can government leaders hold police accountable?
You know, that's a really good question. It's an excellent question. I would like to see that after the demonstrations that came out, the demonstrations were worldwide, that the Americans will see fit to have legislation. The people who make the laws should enact laws that hold the police accountable for what they do. See, in British Columbia and Canada, we have accountability for the police when they do something wrong. For instance, if a police officer does something wrong here, use of force or arrest somebody that they shouldn't arrest, then you can go and lay a complaint with the Public Complaint Commissioner, and they will do an independent investigation. And that can result in demotion, it can result in suspension, it can result in a dismissal of the police officer who committed the wrongdoing. In the U.S., the unions are so strong that there's very little public accountability for police when they do something wrong. Here, I would like to see that because of the huge demonstrations and the huge hue and cry here, that maybe the Americans will finally come up with some kind of laws that will hold police accountable for wrongdoings. That's what needs to be done.
Right. And in BC specifically, there is now a petition with over 18,000 signatures calling for the Solicitor General to make body cameras mandatory for all Mounties in BC. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did say earlier this morning when he made an announcement that he will be making this a priority. Do you think body cameras should be required?
I think they help. They tell us what happened. And also they protect the police, because a lot of the complaints that are made against the police aren't always valid. People often will complain against the police. So a body camera can't lie. It tells you what's happened. And we know the number of incidents in the United States in particular and in Canada where we really don't find out what happened until we saw the camera. I mean, that's what happened in the Chikansky case. That was Robert Chikansky was the man who was tasered to death at the airport. I was the Attorney General at the time, and what happened was that all we had was the account given by the police who tasered them. And the statements they gave were that they were forced to taser him to bring him under control, that he was out of control. They feared for him, therefore they tasered him. But when we saw the camera, the video taken by the camera, we saw that the only thing Mr. Chikansky had in his hand was a stapler. So things like that happen, and they will help us find out what the real circumstances were, what really happened. And for that reason, body cameras are good.
And the public has been very vocal. So, for example, this petition, and as well, there are advocacy groups that are calling for money from police budgets to be put towards social programs and calls to defund the police. And this has been a movement that has spread in the U.S. and is also coming here to Canada. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's a good question, because I don't know if you have to defund the police, but I do think that you have to put money into social programs. You know, if we really want to stop crime, we have to stop it before it's committed. By the time we in the courts see crime, by that time we have victims, and it's too late, because the perpetrator has committed the crime, and so now we have victims suffering. So what we need to do is we have to give counseling for those kids who need it, and we have to get into crime prevention, and so that we don't have victims suffering. We're going to do that. I think it's an excellent idea. I don't know if you have to defund the police, but the fact is governments need to put more funding into helping victims and also for preventing crime from being committed.
And with all this public outcry, society is starting to lose confidence and trust in the police. What possible consequences could this have? Will there be a lack of law-abiding citizens?
Well, I think, no, I think what's happening is that the people who make the laws, the governments who make the laws, will now have to hold the police more accountable for what they do. As I said a moment ago, in Canada, we do a pretty good job of holding the police accountable when they do something wrong. In America, that doesn't happen because police unions are so strong, they protect their members. I mean, the example is Mr. Chauvin, the police officer who killed Mr. Floyd, had 17 prior complaints about the use of force.
Right.
In Canada, any police officer with that kind of record would never, ever be a police officer. You couldn't get him near a police station. The police union head in Minneapolis has 28 prior complaints about use of force. And he shot 3 people, and he's quoted as saying, well, you know what? I shot 3 people, and I don't feel bad about it. See, with that type of attitude, that means that they're not serving the public well, and in fact, they're brutalizing the public when you have that type of prior history regarding the police. And you have to do that. You have to really hold them accountable, and so that the brutality doesn't take place.
And as you say, in Canada, we are more protected. We are holding the police more accountable in contrast with the United States. But there was a video that has been circulating social media. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not, but it's an RCMP officer in Nunavut using the driver door of a moving police truck to knock down an apparently intoxicated man. And many people are, going crazy on social media saying that this is an issue in Canada. This is an issue that we need to address. We do have police brutality here. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this is an issue in Canada as well?
Well, I think that, the police are given very difficult tasks. Right now, our police are expected not only to enforce the law, to stop people who are breaking the law, but we expect them to become social workers, psychologists, and dealing with mental illness, homelessness, and all of those factors. So there's no doubt that the police job is more difficult now than it has at any time in the past. But we trust the police to do these things. So I agree with you that if a police officer does something as flagrant as people say he did, then they must be held accountable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Oppal, for speaking with us, for providing your insight. I think it's an important topic of conversation, and it'll be interesting to see how things start to unfold as there's more public outcry.
Thank you. It's my pleasure being with you, Yasmin.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.